welcome to the final masterclass of this year, which is where we're going to put together everything we've learned over the year about declare play. So this one, I warn you, is going to be really hard because you're going to be trying to balance a whole bunch of things that maybe you'd seen before but only in specific contexts, maybe some things that you'd never seen before, and also trying to think about how we effectively plan when we're trying to make these contracts. So it's a tough one, but I believe in you. And of course, because we've got these videos, you can always rewatch them if you're finding the explanations a little bit difficult. So don't be afraid to do that if you need to. Okay, so there are a few things we have to talk about. This might seem like a really daunting contents list, but it's not as scary as it seems. The way we're going to do it is by working through an example altogether and looking at the different aspects of problems of declare play that we've looked at throughout the year with respect to the example. So first of all, we're going to talk about how we plan the play, which is something that came up in quite a few of the masterclasses this year. We're going to talk about the kind of problems that we might have to solve, things that might come up where we need to work out exactly what to do, or maybe we can already see that there's a problem, but we just have to remember to sort out that problem. Then lines of play, which is just the overarching, how am I going to tackle this hand? If I were going to describe the theme of the hand to someone, what kind of line would I be describing? Refined techniques. So these are things where you might have had a rough idea about how to do them before we covered them in a masterclass, but maybe I gave you, hopefully, some good tips for how to slightly improve your technique so that you just pick up a few more holdings, or maybe you just use some correct judgment in cases where you haven't thought before that you needed to. And finally, I will give you the solution to the example hand that we're discussing, bringing together everything that we've discussed. So planning the play, first of all, is always a good place to start, and of course, that involves counting our tricks. Now, the way we do that is going to depend on whether the contract is a suit contract or a no trump contract. Generally, in a no trump contract, you're going to be counting your winners first, which are the winners you could definitely take right from the offset without doing anything at all. And in a suit contract, you think more about losers. How am I going to avoid losing these tricks? Or maybe if I can't avoid losing them, how do I make sure that those unavoidable ones are the only ones that I lose? Thinking about kind of avoidable versus potentially unavoidable. Unavoidable versus potentially avoidable losers. So how do we do that? Now, we're going to think about where we have a potential for extra tricks. If we're looking at a no trump contract, maybe you have 5 winners, but you need 7 of them. So where are those extra 2 going to come from? This is actually a step that often gets condensed with the first step, because people can be very optimistic about how many winners they think they have to begin with. So they count winners that they don't actually have, and then they don't realize that some of them were only potential winners and that they actually need to do something to establish those. So categorizing them into ones that I definitely have and ones that I'm going to need to make helps to organize your thoughts. And then in terms of suit contracts, getting rid of losers, are there any ways of doing that? And we looked at quite a few techniques this year for how to do it. In a suit contract, for example, you might find sometimes that you have some extra winners. Now, because we're counting losers, we're not really focusing on the number of specific tricks that we have. It might be that we have a trick that's kind of not doing anything, and that will be in the hand that is not the base hand. Remember, the base hand is always the one that we use to count our losers. So if we have some winners that aren't really fulfilling a function, can we instead discard some actual losers on those extra winners? And then they fulfill their function of getting rid of our losers. Just one extra point about that. It's a really good focus point. It's one of the reasons that it's good to count losers in a suit contract, because if you count winners, it doesn't give you guidance about what you're supposed to be throwing away on extra winners. Whereas if you have a big focus in your mind about, okay, these are the losers that are going to cause me problems, then it's a lot easier to decide what to discard on your extra winners. Other things that you might need to consider, this could be for any kind of contract. You might need to make a guess in a suit, or maybe multiple guesses. Or you might have other problems that might arise. Maybe a suit is going to break very badly. Is there a way of getting around that? And then we're going to start thinking about overarching things. What are the techniques or the lines of play that we're going to try to use to combat all of these issues that we thought about, all of the getting rid of the losers or creating extra winners, which ones are the options, and then is there a way of having your cake and eating it so that you can actually combine those? So maybe you've got an option of maybe taking a finesse or maybe playing for a different suit to break. Maybe you could do both of those things and then you get both chances. But in these cases, you often have to be a bit careful about the order in which you do things. So here is our example hand, as advertised earlier. And the dummy hand is the one on the top, then declarer's hand underneath. So dummy is the one with 3 spades, 1 heart, 3 diamonds and 6 clubs, and declarer has 5 spades, 4 hearts, 3 diamonds and 1 club. I'm going to give you an auction. It will hopefully help to cement this example in your mind, but we will keep coming back to it, so don't worry. The auction actually starts with dummy. So dummy is the one who opened the bidding. They opened a club, and actually the opponents have not been silent in this auction. Your right-hand opponent, from the point of view of declarer, decided to bid 1 diamond as an overcall. You bid 1 spade, passed by your left-hand opponent, 2 clubs, of course, by the hand with the 6 clubs. Now the opponents don't say anything for the rest of the auction. You show your second suit, hearts. You're still looking for a major fit. Partner says, okay, well, I have 3 spades, and you have enough points for game, so you raise that one to game. And you know that partner's only got a minimum because they only bid 2 clubs, so you don't need to worry about going any higher. The lead you get is the 9 of diamonds, presumably because their partner bid the suit. And now you have to think about how many tricks you have. Remember, when you're going to count your losers, you're always going to first of all have to decide which hand is the base hand, and generally that should be the one with the longer trumps. In this case, declarer's hand is the one with the longer trumps. It's got 5 compared to dummy's 3. I'm just going to give you a note based on the auction that will be helpful when you're trying to diagnose what to do later. You can keep in mind that right-hand opponent must have 5 or 6 diamonds. Because they bid a diamond, they have to have at least 5. It was an overcall. And because you have 6 diamonds, left-hand opponent has at most 2. So even if they had 3, it wouldn't actually be possible. You don't have to worry about the fact that they haven't supported or anything like that. Okay, so our base hand is our declarer hand, and now we have to count our losers. In spades, we have none. We have all the top spades, not concerned at all. In hearts, maybe you would be thinking that you have a trick or two, maybe 2 in hearts, But remember, we're being as pessimistic as possible at the beginning. We are assuming that we do nothing clever at all. So we simply start by playing the highest heart that we have, which is the king, followed by the second highest, which is the jack, then the 8, then the 6. And if you imagine doing it like that, you can see easily that the opponents will always have something to beat, whichever heart you've played. So that's actually 4 heart losers. In diamonds, the ace will win, then we can play the jack, that will lose, and then we can play the 6 and that will lose. And notice that I'm including the jack as the second highest card, even though it's in the dummy, so it doesn't actually have to be in the base hand. The base hand is the one that's defining the number of times we look at the suit. We look at it 3 times, that's because declarer has 3 diamonds. We look at hearts 4 times because declarer has 4 hearts. And similarly with the clubs, we have no losers, and we don't have the 7, the 6, the 5 and the 4 to worry about because those are not in the base hand, and we only have to look at the suit once because the length in the base hand is 1, and we have the ace, that's the highest card in the suit, so we're not going to lose that trick. So all in all, we've got 6 losers, and unfortunately we can only afford to lose 3. So we're going to have to be a little bit careful about how we play this one, but that's okay because we're going to discuss it. Problems that we have. Now notice that the problems that we have are focusing on the suits where we had losers. We're not stressing about clubs and spades because we didn't have any losers there. So the first thing that counting our losers is going to do, apart from giving us an idea of how close we are to our target, is it's going to keep our mind focused on where our problems are. So in hearts, we have a few things that are going on. We have a bit of guessing potentially to do because we have a couple of honours and the opponents have a couple of honours, and we might have to do a bit of guessing about who has the queen and who has the ace. There could be some roughing to do in hearts because we have longer hearts in our base hand than we do in the short hand, the dummy. So that could be an option as well. It could even be that we get a chance to discard a heart or 2 on extra winners in the dummy. And in diamonds, we don't have quite so many options. We don't have any guessing. We know what's going on in diamonds. Right-hand opponent has everything. Even if we didn't know, it would be very difficult to use the information to any sort of benefit. There's not really a guess available. And of course, there's no roughing because the 2 hands have the same length in the suit. So no roughing either. So in that case, our only option in diamonds is discarding. Since we were talking about extra winners for discards, let's think about what those might be. The clubs have not had any of our attention so far, but if they've not got losers, then maybe they've got winners. So we can kind of focus in that way. The king of clubs is not doing anything at the moment. The ace is covering our 2 in our base hand, but the king is just sitting there without a job. So that's definitely an extra winner. It could also be that if it turns out that the clubs are 3-3 in the opponent's hands, that we could play ace of clubs, king of clubs, club, we ruff, and now we have 3 long clubs in the dummy that are also extra winners because nobody else can follow suit. So there's that to keep in mind as well. Now, the initial thought here is, let's think about the extra winner that we definitely have. We could use that to discard one of our losers, either in hearts or diamonds. So why have I said here that I'm definitely going to discard a diamond rather than a heart on the king of clubs? Well, it all goes back to the line with the problems. You can see that with hearts, there are quite a few options for what to do. We could guess correctly, we could do some roughing, we could also discard. It's an option. But for diamonds, we had no choice but to discard. So it seems like a sensible thing to do. Discard the one that can only be discarded, and maybe we can find an alternative in hearts. Right, let's think about the problems that we're going to need to solve. First of all, let's think about it in the context of the masterclasses that we've covered. So things that we thought about that might be problems are things like suit blockages, which is where you have honours or very big cards that are getting in the way of cashing all the tricks you have available in a suit. Entries in general, which are kind of related. Sometimes a blockage can cause entry issues, but sometimes you just need a bit of communication between your two hands, and you need to think about how you're going to achieve that. Don't always have aces in every suit in both hands, sadly. And then solving guesses as well, thinking about what we know about the opponent's hands, who we think might have honours that we're missing, those sorts of things. So with respect to this example again, in hearts, we're going to need to guess who has the ace and who has the queen. We're always thinking about playing towards the strength, so say that we play the 7. If we think and maybe right-hand opponent makes it difficult by playing a small card. If they do that, then if we think they have the ace, then it will work for us to play the king. Then we won't have to lose to the ace at all. But if we think that they have the queen, then it's better for us to play the jack and hopefully force out left-hand opponent's ace with the jack, and that establishes our king. If we get it right, our number of losers now goes down to 4. Remember, we've reduced it from 6 to 5 by discarding a diamond. Now, a correct guess will reduce it to 4. And now we're feeling a little bit more optimistic about our contract because we're only one trick away from making it. As well as considering what to do about your heart guess, you're also going to need to be thinking about your entries on this hand. So that's going to be a very relevant problem that you might have to solve. Your ace of diamonds is already being knocked out by the fact that they've led a diamond. So while before you might have thought that's a really handy entry to my hand, here with them leading a diamond, it's not anymore because it will be gone before you can use it effectively. So your trumps are going to need to be your entries to hand. That could either be by using them as high cards or by ruffing, depending on the overall line that you decide to go for. But either way, that might make things a little bit complicated for you because it will limit your options a little bit. Now we need to talk about the lines of play that we've discussed in the masterclasses this year. We have, of course, discussed drawing trumps, which is often something you should do, but not always. So really thinking about the reasons why and when is a good time to do it. Discarding losers, we've touched on this briefly actually in this particular lesson because we've been thinking about those extra club winners and how we can use those to discard our diamond and heart losers from our hand. Roughing in the shorthand, we've also mentioned. It's not in so many words, but it's something that sounds a lot more complicated than it is. It just means that you're taking roughs in the hand that has shorter trumps, which is by definition going to be the hand that isn't the base hand. And finally, eliminations we talked about very recently. Those are lines where you try to get your opponents to play a suit for you by eliminating all their friendly options, taking them away, and making it so that they have no option but to help you. Which lines of play might be applicable in this hand? Well, there are a couple of options. We could choose to ruff the third round of clubs. And if the clubs are 3-3, draw trumps, finishing in the dummy. It's going to be very important. Rather than doing the usual top of the short where you play the king first and then a small one up to your ace, queen, jack, you're going to need to do it backwards because of this entry issue that we pointed out earlier. Your entries are not fluid between these two hands at all. So you're going to need to make sure that you finish drawing trumps at the point when you win in the dummy with the king. So that would entail ace of spades, queen of spades, spade to the king. And now, if all the trumps are gone, playing your club winners will just mean that you get to discard your losers. The second option is quite different. It would involve instead deciding to ruff 1 or 2 hearts in the dummy, 1 or 2 depending on whether you solve your guess. And then you can draw trumps after that. So this actually ties in with a few different topics that we discussed in this section, because not only are we considering one where we're discarding losers and one where we're ruffing in the shorthand, but we're also thinking about the timing of drawing trumps. In option 1, we take 1 ruff and then we decide to draw trumps sort of backwards, as it were. But effectively we're getting to a point where we draw trumps and then we play some winners. Whereas option 2 is a bit more, you can't really draw trumps straight away. So you have to start by doing some ruffing. And you're going to end up having to do quite a lot of ruffing because you won't be able to use your trumps as entries to your hand because you need them for ruffing. It's something we'll look at in detail later on. So between option 1 and 2, which one should you choose? Option 2 is better than option 1 because not only does 1 require the clubs to be exactly 3-3, but you're also going to need the trumps to be 3-2. Whereas option 2 just means, just requires for there to not be an overruff in hearts or clubs. It's even better if you get the heart guess right because you don't need to risk so many ruffs either. Okay, how did we refine our techniques this year? We thought about combining finessing with also cashing honours. Sometimes you need to specifically cash an honour from a particular hand. Sometimes there's only one hand where you might cash. And sometimes you can't afford to cash an honour and you have to just take your finesse straight away. 8 ever, 9 never. It's a rule that you see people following blindly. But this year we looked into how, when you need to apply some caveats to it, how applicable is it to this particular situation? Do we have some evidence that's swaying us away from those probabilities? And the other thing that we considered is ducking as declarer. So when do you want to do some ducking to cut communications? Or maybe keep a certain opponent on lead. Do we need to consider any of those refined techniques on this hand? Well, here it helps to look at the auction in the lead once again, because although there is no honour to cash before we potentially take a heart finesse, and there's no 8 ever, 9 never situation, we do have a situation where we might want to duck, and that's in the diamond suits, the one that they've led. So the first reason we're thinking about this is that there isn't actually a legitimate way of avoiding losing a diamond. No matter what we do, at some point we're going to have to lose to the ace of hearts, at least. And at that point, we won't have been able to throw away enough diamonds to have no diamond losers. So in that case, we have this loser that we're definitely going to get anyway. So it begs the question, is it worth a duck on trick 1? What is that duck achieving? Well, the idea is that if left-hand opponent has 1 diamond, then this is their only way of getting to their partner's hand, unless their partner happens to have the ace of hearts. But if they have 2 diamonds, you can cut it off by ducking first and then winning the second round, meaning that they still don't have a way of getting to their partner's hand after this. And that might just make things a little bit easier for us as opposed to the opponents, because they won't be able to freely travel between each other's hands and arrange to be in the hand that they want to be in. So the thing to decide here is, if the diamonds are 1, 6, so 1 on your left and 6 on your right, we do not want to duck because we don't want to miss out on taking our ace. And if the diamonds are 2 on our left and 5 on our right, we do want to duck because we want to be able to cut the communications at the point where left-hand opponent runs out of diamonds. Now, how do we know? The 9 could be from a singleton or a doubleton, as far as we're concerned. Well, remember that little note earlier? We thought about the fact that right-hand opponent had 5 to 6 diamonds. Well, that was slightly misleading because I didn't go through the full thought process with you at that point. But think about it this way. If right-hand opponent wanted to bid with 6 diamonds, and they're quite good ones, they have King, Queen, 10, definitely, then they would be able to potentially jump to 2 diamonds over 1 club. That would show a weak hand with 6 diamonds. Perfect. Or they could have bid 1 diamond, as they did, and then when 2 clubs came around, bid 2 diamonds, and that would have shown a slightly stronger hand, sort of intermediate type level hand. So they had a way of showing 6 diamonds no matter how strong they were. So they didn't do that, therefore they're very likely to not have 6 diamonds. In that case, we do want to duck and to cut the communications between the 2 hands. Right, now we've talked about everything that there is to talk about on this hand. We have to put it all together. Here is our lead. I give you a bit more information. The 9 gets covered by the 10 on your right. Your turn. Start by ducking and win trick 2. We've decided that's the best way. Then, very quickly, we want to get rid of this 3rd round of diamonds. So we cash the ace, king of clubs, and we discard our 3rd diamond on the king of clubs. And that reduces us down to 5 losers. Now comes the time. We're going to do some ruffling in hearts, but we also want to make a guess. We're in the right hand for doing that, so let's play a heart up towards our king jack in preparation for a guess. If right-hand opponent has the ace, they're looking at a singleton in the dummy. So chances are they're going to be playing their ace to make sure that they don't let you just steal a trick and not have any heart losers at all. That would be a little bit embarrassing. The other thing is that they might want to be rising with the ace to potentially play a diamond, because that puts you under a little bit of pressure. So if they don't play the ace, they don't have it, and that means that you can try the jack. If you're right, that reduces your number of losers to 4. But now you have a few options for what to do. You need to think about all the different scenarios here, because we don't know what's happened at this point. We're still planning. If right-hand opponent wins the ace of hearts and plays a diamond, we really need to ruff high. Remember, we know that left-hand opponent is out of diamonds, so we have to ruff with, say, the ace. Now we ruff a heart, and that will reduce us to 3 losers. We're making our contract. If left-hand opponent is the one who wins the ace after we played the jack, and they play a trump, which is a bit annoying because we want to be ruffing these hearts, win in your hand, and that means that you're in the right place for ruffing a heart straight away for your reduction to 3 losers. There's another possibility. We might have got the guess wrong. So maybe left-hand opponent had both cards, or maybe right-hand opponent didn't play the ace even though they had it. So then, if left-hand opponent wins the queen and plays a trump, you can win in your hand and ruff a heart. Now you're a little bit pressed because you don't have an easy way back to your hand. So this is where the concern about entries comes in. You have to ruff a club over to your hand and then ruff the second heart. But that will reduce you to 3 losers. You just need slightly more things to work out. You need there really not to be an over-ruffing clubs. The other option is that left-hand opponent might not play a trump. They might decide to play a club. If they're 4-2, this is not very interesting. You can over-ruff if necessary, if right-hand opponent ruffs. But if they're 3-3, this is very helpful now, because you can change the plan to option 1. And this is, like we said earlier, a way of having your cake and eating it. You can draw the trumps backwards and play the clubs as winners. Now the real solution, I didn't mention anything about a real solution because it seems like we've thought about all the eventualities here, and we've thought, what are we going to do if this is what happens? What are we going to do if this is what happens? And we've got this whole plan in our head, and it seems to result in only 3 losers a lot of the time. So why do I need a real solution? What's that about? Well, it's all about timing. You should think about all of this on trick 1 before you play a card from the dummy. And you'll notice we haven't done any of this playing yet. We've considered all the possibilities at this stage, but we don't exactly know what's going to happen. The reason we do this is because it makes it a lot easier to respond if the opponents do something you don't expect, because you've already thought about the problems that might occur in different situations. And another reason is just it helps you to focus and keep in mind what your plan was, because you've really thought about it in a logical, methodical way, and it's easier to bring to mind those sorts of things rather than kind of confused half plans. Okay, so now it's time to head to the tournament. Try the practice hands, see how you get on. Some of them a bit tricky, but that's fine. We like a challenge. And if you need to watch this video again, feel free. Okay, and I'll see you at the end of each deal. Take care, everyone.